You all know the traditional Easter greeting. We've used it already this morning, where one person says, "Christ is risen," and the other responds, "Christ is risen indeed." Well done.
We have two variations.
We have an alleluia or not. Either way, it works. Christians have been exchanging those words of mutual assurance and proclamation for hundreds and hundreds of years, since the very early days of the church. And I think it always feels right to get them out again this time of year. It's sort of like bringing out a box of Christmas ornaments that you haven't seen for a year and putting them on the tree again. But the reading that we just heard from Luke's Gospel takes place before all of that. Before there was a church that had had a chance to reflect and think and make some sense of what the news of the resurrection meant. Before the Easter news had had a chance to sort of work its way into the fabric of the life of Jesus' friends and followers. On that first Easter morning, as you all just heard, the proclamation of good news was not met with such a confident and assured response as we're used to. So to get in the spirit of the Bible, let's try this. I say, "Christ is risen," and you all say, "Huh?" Let's try. "Christ is risen." Thank you for humoring me. I've really been wanting to do that. And that is much closer to the spirit of Easter as the Bible presents it. It seemed to them an idle tale. That's how Luke describes the reaction of the male disciples when the women first come and share this news of the resurrection. And really, idle tale is a nice translation of the Greek word that's used there. The word leiros is found nowhere else in the whole Bible, and it is not a polite word. It means nonsense, garbage, crazy talk. It's a nasty word, actually. And it's what the male disciples, Jesus' own friends and followers, said when they first heard the report of the resurrection. Hooey, junk, leiros. And Peter said the same, according to Luke. He saw the women come running into the room and bravely and breathlessly recount what they'd just seen. This tomb that was supposed to be filled with the terrible smell of death that held nothing but air. The two strange figures who told them to remember Jesus' words and who told them they were looking in the wrong sort of place altogether because the one they were looking for was not dead, but alive. Peter heard it all, and he let those words hang in the air a moment. And then he joined the others in his assessment. "Yeah, right," he said. "I get what you're doing. You're trying to make us feel better with your fairy tale ending, but it's no use. This is the real world. This is the world where nails pierce skin, and breath leaves a body, and the powerful are always going to be in charge. This is the world where beautiful old buildings catch fire, and everything passes. And all there is for us to do is accept it. So either you're making stories up or you're hallucinating. Either way, it doesn't make sense. It's silly, it's ridiculous, it's garbage." That's what he said to the women that first Easter morning, dismissing their claim that something extraordinary had taken place. Because, of course, the ordinary world had just had its say all over again in what had happened to Jesus in the last days. This teacher who had inspired so much hope, who had tapped into the deepest longings of so many people, faced the same kind of ending that everybody who stood up to the powerful seemed to face. Betrayal, defeat, death, silence. It's an old story, and Peter knew it well, just like we do. So he set aside the crazy talk of the resurrection, just like they all did. And really, there's nothing very remarkable about that fact, right? Luke is just being honest here, I think, putting down what probably any reasonable person would say when faced with the kind of bizarre news they heard that morning. What would any of us have said to those words, "Christ is risen," if we'd been in their shoes? I don't know about you, but sounds about right for me. There's nothing very remarkable about the disciples' response here. What feels remarkable to me instead is that something apparently stirred inside Peter afterward. A sort of uneasiness about calling the women's words just garbage. A small voice inside him maybe recalling what life with Jesus had been like. Maybe he remembered how Jesus had always helped him to see a world beyond the familiar, the dreary, the seemingly inevitable. How he even took a step into that world sometimes, with Jesus at his side. Something stirred inside him, and he found his feet were moving. Walking at first, and then running, and before he even knew where he was going, there he was, at the tomb himself, looking in. Because something inside him wondered if it might all be true after all. If the crazy story might be more than just crazy. I sailed right past my bus stop a few weeks ago. It's a route that I know by heart. This is the #1 bus from my house to the hospital. I have ridden this route countless times to visit people there, and I could tell you every stop in between those two by heart. I know it very well. But on this particular morning, I just sat there looking out the window while the bus stopped at Hôpital and headed right on to Philosophe. It was an ordinary day in lots of ways. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, light traffic, some construction on the roads, a bus filled with people who looked like they were on their way to meetings or appointments or walks in the park with a stroller. And it was also 2 days after my son had been born, which I think had something to do with me missing my stop. It was an ordinary day, but nothing seemed ordinary. I was watching the same familiar stops go by, but it all seemed impossibly beautiful. The light that was reflected on the cars, the metalwork on the balconies, on all the buildings, the pigeons that were poking around empty cafe tables, the way a person on a bicycle can be absolutely still as he zips down the street. It was all perfectly lovely, and it was like I was seeing it for the first time. So I was paying no attention at all when my stop was called and half the people on the bus got off and the doors closed again and we were off past the hospital. Having a baby can do that. It can make you see the familiar world for more than just its familiarity, for more than just the inevitability of it. It can make you see everything around you for the gift that it is. And so can Easter. Because the empty tomb is pure gift. It means there is more to this world than just cause and effect, than just one thing after another, than the same old of plodding and striving and winning and losing. Maybe Peter missed his stop when he ran back from the tomb to tell the others at the house where they were staying. Maybe he ran to the temple by mistake or to the grocery store. Because what he had encountered, what he had seen in the empty tomb, and what he was beginning to experience in his own life was this impossibly beautiful news that in Jesus, God is not merely obeying the same old rules, the same old tired ways of life and death. God has opened up the infinite possibility of new life. There's so much around us to convince us that the old rules are all that apply, right? Beloved churches catch fire like any other building. Loved ones age and become sick like any other people. The powerful continue to lord their power over those who are weak in so many places. Peace can seem like a distant dream. Death spares none of us. But Easter comes as God's surprise. God's word to us time and again that the old rules are not everything. That God is not bound by our limited imaginations, our limited vision, our settling for low expectations. God is not bound by even the seemingly absolute boundary of death. In Jesus, God is always up to something new. I imagine you have seen icons like the image on the front of your bulletin today before. It's an example of one way that Christians have been picturing the resurrection for hundreds and hundreds of years. Jesus bursting out of the grave and rising up from death to life with God. And what I love about these images is that Jesus' hands are never empty. You see that? Jesus is always holding on to the hands of others in these pictures, pulling them up with him. This sort of image insists that Jesus is not content to be resurrected all by himself. He means to bring others along. It's a way of picturing what Paul says in his letter to the Corinthians about Jesus being the first fruits of those who have died. For Paul, the resurrection is not just about what God did once upon a time. It is about what God is still doing in Jesus, taking this world and each of us by the hand and pulling us all from death toward new life. It sounds too good to be true, right? It sounds unbelievable, crazy. Huh? Sounds like a perfectly reasonable response. The only other options are amazement and joy. So my wish for you this Easter is that you might miss your stop. That one of these days, maybe weeks from now or months from now, because the promise of the resurrection is not limited to one day a year. One of these days, something will stir inside you, and you will find yourself unexpectedly caught in the giftedness of everything. Of your own life, of the beauty of the world around you, of the God who in Jesus is pulling all of it, willingly or kicking and screaming, toward new life. I hope that promise and that deep truth will stir in you and keep surprising you beyond the familiarity of one stop after another. Because our God is full of surprises. And no matter how often the world says no, in Jesus, God is speaking a new word. And it is always yes, yes, yes. Amen.